Hello everybody, I'm Rowan6 with Rowan6 Entertainment, and welcome to a new series, a audiobook series of my fanfiction, The Dragon Hero Dovahkiin. The background art for this fanfiction is created by me. If you're interested in me doing art commissions for you, the link to my business Discord is down below. There's also a link to my community Discord, as well as the fanfiction link. Thank you, and enjoy the video.
After a failed suicide attempt, Izuku Midoriya was hit by an unknown quirk by an unknown person and sent to the world of Skyrim. There, he learns a lesson that he will never forget: quirkless does not mean worthless. When he returns home with two companions in tow, he is determined to make sure the world learns that same lesson. Inspired by CallMePinkLasagna, the Dragonborn returns. Chapter 1, Journey. Are you sure you two want to do this? Izuku asked his two closest companions. In the center of a great hall stood a man with curly green hair and freckles adorning his face. With him were his 7 comrades, those who stood with him on his journey throughout Skyrim. It shouldn't make a difference if 2 more people are added to the spell. But the final decision lies with you. A red-headed Nord mage known as Cradarin, Lord of Flames, explained. Then Grandmaster Delphine of the Blades voiced her opinion. Come on Izuku, you need to give those 2 some credit. Lydia's no longer just the housecarl sworn to carry your burdens. This is a choice she's making out of her own volition. And there's no way Serena would want to be left behind, considering you're the closest thing she has to a family left. Izuku knew she was right, but he was still hesitant to rip the 2 from the place they'd called home for their entire lives. He knew how it felt to be stranded in an unfamiliar world and the loneliness associated with it, so he didn't want his dearest companions to experience that same grief. It's as Grandmaster Delphine says. I follow you not out of my duty to Whiterun, but out of my fealty to you. Lydia was Izuku's first companion and his first friend. They met in Whiterun before she was his companion and ended up being his reward for defending Whiterun from a dragon attack and becoming a Thane. When she first met Izuku, he was a shell of his former self. She helped him along with others in piecing him back together. She did not know if he could be fixed, but eventually, she realized just how silly she was being. Izuku had proven to her time and time again that he truly was a hero who deserved every ounce of her respect. His staunch dedication to bettering the realm, his unwavering loyalty to his friends, his unmatched bravery when faced against insurmountable odds, his intelligent mind, and his kindness were unending. These were all qualities she'd seen in Izuku as she served as his housecarl, and he was nothing like the broken boy that she met all those years ago. Now she only wished to serve him to the fullest. But Lydia remembered her frustration at being left behind, unable to fight alongside her lord during his battles with Alduin and Marek. Now the thought of being left behind again was just too much. So please, my Thane. Please don't leave me behind again. Lydia was now on the verge of tears before Izuku could move to comfort Lydia. His other cherished companion stepped forward and placed her hand on her shoulder. Don't worry Lydia, Izuku can't get rid of us that easily, Serena said in a comforting tone. She then looked Izuku dead in the eyes and then beamed a feral grin at him. If you really think you can talk us out of following you, then you might be dumber than we give you credit for. Make no mistake, even if you decided to leave us behind, I'd travel through the plains of oblivion just to find you. And once I do, I'd beat you ragged until you realize your mistake, Serena said with so much conviction and intensity that a bead of sweat started to form on Izuku's brow. He knew the vampire well enough to know she wasn't kidding. It seemed like Izuku was beginning to relent, he just needed one final push. Plus, someone has to watch you so you don't do anything stupid. This time, it was the new Thieves Guild leader Brynjolf. And as much as I'd love to be around to clean up your messes, the Thieves Guild needs their leader now more than ever. Especially after the Mercer fiasco. Brynjolf said with a tired sigh. I too have been away from the college long enough, we will definitely miss your presence there and your revolutionary ideas on magic. But I must get back to my students. Tolfter the new archmage says tiredly. And thanks to you, I have new students to teach the way of the voice. So I'll need to get back very soon as well. Arngeir says with a sigh. Izuku immediately remembers the difficult negotiations between the Blades and the Greybeards. It was hard to get them to settle all of their differences. But thanks to those negotiations, some members of the Blades have been granted permission to be trained in the ways of the voice. He was knocked out of his musings when Kradarin spoke up. I still have to find Ember and I know he's in this realm somewhere. But when I'm done, who knows? I might join you. Then Ela chips in. And plus somebody needs to keep you from getting yourself killed. The unofficial leader of the companions says with a fond smile on her face. Izuku blushed as he scratched the back of his head. Sure, he'd often put others before himself and recklessly charge into danger, but Izuku only did so because he knew he could handle it, despite what his friends thought. Plus, he trusted his friends to cover for him in case he did slip up. Seeing as the two companions in question wouldn't back down and the rest of his friends agreed with their decision, Izuku gave one last sigh and relented. All right, you two can come. I certainly wouldn't mind the company. Despite his outward protests, deep down, Izuku wanted them to follow him. As Delphine said, Serena had seen him and Lydia as family. Izuku shared the same sentiment. It had been 10 years since Izuku was taken from his home on Earth and thrust into Skyrim, where he met so many other people. He'd known Lydia the longest, so their closeness was a given. Serena, on the other hand, was the last person to join his party. But despite knowing him the shortest, the two had formed a deep connection considering everything Izuku had done for her. And with Lydia being like the younger sister she never had, the three were nearly inseparable. Then that settles it. Make your preparations, the spell will be cast tomorrow morning. And with that, Izuku Midoriya, the last Dragonborn, the hero of Skyrim, prepared to return to Earth. With his two closest companions in tow. Chapter 2, The Dragonborn Returns. Izuku had already experienced being ripped from Earth and thrust into Mundus before, but this was totally different from before. The first time was like being stretched like a rubber band and slingshotted into a different world. But this was like being torn apart and put back together. The pain was immense and all Izuku could think about was the pain. Every cell in his body screaming out for it to stop. But as Izuku thought he was going to go insane, a bright light engulfed him and the pain stopped. As Izuku's feet hit the ground, he fell to his knees. On instinct, he cast two spells. The first one was a healing spell, the second one was one of his own that he had created. It was a clear mind spell that was meant to focus the mind when in extreme pain or mental strain. Izuku was pretty sure even with this spell, his mind was still a little fuzzy. Because when he saw the city buildings from the rooftop he was on top of, he was in a trance for a second or two. Which didn't last long because he heard a loud squeak and "What the hell happened to me?" from a familiar voice. Izuku turned around to the sound of the voice and what he saw shocked him. Because in front of him were two of his companions that looked like they were 10 years younger, and Serena was freaking out. Looking closer at his companions, he can tell that Lydia and Serena looked around the same age that he was before he left, which was 14. Lydia was still wearing her enchanted Nordic plate armor, and luckily the enchantments on the armor had a size adjustment so it could fit anyone who wore it. And now she's looking at Serena, who was in shock. But Serena looked completely different. First, her skin looked a lot less pale. In fact, her face was red, either from embarrassment or anger, which one, he did not know. Her eyes were no longer blood red but instead a dark blue. But her eyes were still slitted and she still had her fangs, but they looked to be slightly smaller than before somehow. In a sense, she looked like all her vampiric traits were somehow lessened, but not completely. She was also still wearing her light-armored wizard robes that he made for her. Thank God I gave her the fitting enchantment as well. Izuku thought to himself as he mustered the strength to speak up. Serena. Lydia. Is that you? Izuku said weakly. He needed to make sure he was not seeing things. Serena and Lydia looked over at Izuku and immediately noticed the state that he was in. Besides him looking like the day that Lydia met him, he was also pale, his body was shaking and he was on his knees. Serena was the first to react. Rushing over to him, she immediately started casting a diagnostic spell that she and Izuku developed together. The diagnostic spell was one of the easiest things to learn that they developed, and it's extremely effective. The spell allowed you to see all the stats, medical information, as well as racial traits, and other factors. Simply put, in the right hands the spell can easily diagnose any problem. Pulling a potion out of her bag, she slowly poured it down Izuku's throat. After he finishes the potion, he immediately starts to feel better. Getting to his feet, he looked at Serena and spoke. What happened to you two, and me? Izuku squeaked out. His voice cracked and it was a lot younger than he was used to. His deep raspy voice was now replaced with a younger and more squeaky one. I do not know, but besides us being 10 years younger, you are suffering from soul drain sickness. Don't worry though, it is not as bad as the time when we entered the soul care and you needed to sacrifice half your soul to enter. This time though it's only 5% missing, which you can easily recover from. For now, I just gave you a potion to diminish the side effects. But the question is, where did the soul go to? We stored all our soul gems in the dimensional space that you made so this exact thing would not happen. Serena asked. Izuku's analytical mind immediately started to kick in. Serena was right, the soul had to go somewhere. Getting an idea, he cast his own diagnostic spell on Serena, and what he got shocked him. Serena, you're no longer undead. Izuku said, gobsmacked at the results he was getting. What do you mean I'm no longer undead? I can still feel my vampiric powers. Serena said, a little shocked. You're still classified as a vampire, but you're no longer undead. You have a heartbeat, all your organs are operating normally, and you have a piece of my soul. But what's even more strange though is that your vampirism is somehow bonded to your DNA. Normally when your undead status is removed, the vampirism will be removed as well. It's like you're now a new breed of vampire altogether, almost like a dash dot. Izuku said before being cut off by a mysterious voice that came from behind him. A hybrid. A mysterious voice said. Izuku quickly turned around, and in front of him was one of the people he hoped would never meet. Because in front of him is the entity that guards the gateways between dimensions. There was very little information that he could find on this entity during his time in Skyrim, but all the information that he found gave him the impression not to piss this entity off. His analytical mind on overdrive, he quickly analyzed the entity for all the information he could gather. He could see that the entity's skin was as white as snow. He wears a red Victoria-era Gothic long trench coat with black large epaulets on the shoulders, large black folded cuffs, and a red and black striped sun hat with a feather in it. The creature finally meets his eyes. He notices his eyes glow with a yellow hue. His mouth is connected to his eyes in the shape of a smile with a dark blackness behind them. Drawn by Rowan 6. If you wish to see the image of the gatekeeper, check out my Discord in the fan art section. Oh young Izuku Midoriya, it is a pleasure to meet you. I am the gatekeeper and I am here to give you a one-time warning. The gatekeeper says in a clear British accent and in an over-exaggerated manner, like he was performing in some grand play. And what warning would that be, if I may ask? Izuku says as politely as possible as he tries to keep a level head. Killing intent rode off of the gatekeeper, causing Izuku and the others to tense up. Oh, that's quite simple, don't bypass my dimension again. It is my job to regulate the flow of people coming in and out of different dimensions. There are changes and rules that must be upheld. You being mortals most likely did not know this, so I'm letting you off with a warning. You're lucky I caught you in between the dimensional gap, or your previously undead friend there would be a pile of dust. This dimension cannot risk anyone connected or who made a contract with Malag Bal to be here. So you're lucky I was able to modify you a bit. Don't worry, it's not too much, I just made you mortal and into a new species. Congratulations, you're now the first human-vampire hybrid. You still need to drink blood, but you should be able to eat normal food like the rest of all mortals, and you will age at a normal rate. So count yourself lucky, little miss, that I interfered. Oh, I also made you all younger as well and sent you back to the day before you left Izuku. Now I must be going, I was just making sure you know not to fuck with me, toodaloo. The gatekeeper said in a menacing tone. Then in a quick flash of light, he was gone. Oh, I think we really dodged an arrow there, Lydia said. She was fully aware of what could have happened to them if they pissed that entity off. When learning the risks of traveling between dimensions, she was briefed on the entity they knew as the gatekeeper. If they entered his dimension, there was literally no chance of fighting against him if something went wrong with the negotiations. He has complete control of everything inside his dimension and anything in it. That and all the information Izuku could gather on the entity can be pretty much summed up in one sentence, and that was not to fuck with it. Normally they had to pass through his dimension, either way. But Izuku was able to figure a couple of things out after he was thrust into Mundus for the first time. Apparently, when it happened, he had left a hole between his dimension and the other, so he opted to bypass the gatekeeper's dimension entirely. Why take the risk, right? So seeing the gatekeeper in front of them was a terrifying experience. She could tell even outside his dimension he could obliterate them without a second thought. But before she could go further into her thoughts, Serena spoke up. So, Izuku, you should know what happens today, right? Since we are at the day before you left. Is there anything of note that we might be able to change or take advantage of? Serena asked, in the hopes of distracting everybody from what just happened, as well as getting everybody back on track. Standing up, Izuku starts to think. This is the same day that I met All Might, and if I remember correctly, this is actually the same roof that I jumped off of. Izuku thought to himself as the memory played through his mind. Shaking his head, he pushed back all of the bad memories and tried to focus. He does not need to remember his failed suicide attempt, which, if he is correct, didn't happen anyway. Looking up at the position of the sun, he could tell that it was an hour after All Might crushed his dream. He could easily remember the position of the sun because he stared up at the sky for 2 hours before his attempt at suicide. Sigh. This is really going to put a damper on his plans. He was planning when he got back home to see if his mother was still alive, and if so, apologize to her and explain what happened. Then go to UA and see if he can get a teaching position there after getting his hero license. He had a whole speech and a way to explain to the smartest being in the universe how he could use magic. Then convince him to pull some strings for him and his companions. But no, the gatekeeper had to go and put him back where it all started. Izuku guessed this was some type of payback from the gatekeeper in the attempt to ruin his plans, but maybe this is not a bad thing but an opportunity. Besides the sludge villain incident, which he would have missed around 20 minutes ago, there was not much to change there anyway. Katsuki Bakugo was saved by All Might, and besides property damage, no one else was hurt. So pretty much nothing else. Besides my suicide attempt and the Big Bennies on the way home having a half sale on their burgers, not much. Izuku said bitterly. Lydia and Serena remembered when he told them about one of the lowest points of his life, and all because of that man, All Might, who would crush a boy's dream and then leave them on a rooftop. It was nothing but the height of stupidity. It was almost like he was asking him to do it. Attempting to change the subject, Lydia decides to focus on the second thing he pointed out. It had nothing to do with the fact it was on her personal list of foods to try out in this new world. Her mouth watered at the thought of an actual hamburger. Izuku made some of his dishes from his homeland, and one of Lydia's favorites was the hamburger. The opportunity to eat a hamburger at half the price is something that she could not pass up on. Plus she bet Serena would love something to eat since now she could eat normal food. Then why don't we check out that Big Benny place? I always wanted to try an actual hamburger, and I bet that Serena is really hungry because of the fact that she has not eaten in 1,000 years. Lydia gave Serena a look that said, go along with it, it's for the best. Serena picked up the attempt to change the subject and to distract Izuku, which was a good idea, so she quickly decided to help. It has been more than 1,000 years, but she's right. I had nothing but a diet of blood for a very long time, and I have to admit it, eating solid food again would be enjoyable. If what I heard from Lydia about these hamburgers, they would definitely be a good meal. Serena said. Izuku instantly knew what they were trying to pull, and he appreciated it. Okay, I think I stored my wallet in one of my dimensional chests. Let me conjure the chest real quick and grab the stuff we need. Serena, I need you to cast an illusion so we look like we're wearing clothes that won't draw too much attention. Izuku asked as he walked over to the center of the rooftop. With a nod from her, she quickly cast an illusion spell on all three of them. After feeling the illusion take hold, Izuku cast the spell that would summon one of his dimensional storage chests. When the chest appeared, he wasted no time in opening it. When he opened it, nostalgia took hold of him. Everything in this chest is what he had on him when he was transported into Skyrim. This included his school bag with school supplies and his notebooks. His cell phone was neatly tucked in one of the pockets of his bag with his charger. His old battered school uniform was neatly folded in the small corner of the chest, and resting on it was his wallet. Quickly grabbing his wallet and stuffing his clothes into his old school bag, he wasted no time and quickly slung his school bag over his shoulder. Then he closed his chest and dispelled it. He then pulled out his phone. He was glad that he left enough power so he could message his mom when he was back. Wasting no time, he quickly messaged his mom that he would be home late. He then put his phone in his pocket. Pulling out his wallet, he confirmed that he had enough money to buy some food, and after confirming it, he turned to his two companions. "Well, I guess lunch is on me," Izuku said while smiling at the fact that he had such good friends.
Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!